Greetings, Manta-Ray79 here, and today I'm back with another deck profile video for the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game. In today's video, the deck profile I'm going to be doing one for is premium formats, Kageros, Dragonic Overlords, plus Zanbust Dragon. Alright then, let's get started. First off, the main deck. The starting unit, Grade 0, Lizard Soldier Conroe. Starting unit, Grade 0, Lizard Soldier Conroe. His first skill is Forerunner. When ridden on top of, you can move him from your soul to the rear guard. And the second skill, which is the best of all, by counterblasting 1 and retreating Conroe from your own rear guard, you can search your deck for any Grade 1 or less Kagero unit and add it to your hand. Ideally, you can use this skill to add perhaps Stride Fodders, Perfect Guards, or heal triggers to use for Generation Guards. Ideally, in my opinion, this guy is the best starting unit for all Kagero decks in the G and premium formats. Alright, next, let's go to the Grade 1 lineup. For the Grade 1 lineup of this deck, we have 4 Lizard General Conroes, 4 Lava Flow Dragons, 3 Dragon Knight Nassers, and 2 Purple Gem Carbuncles. The Grade 1 Lizard General Conroe. In my opinion, he's a must-have for all Kagero Overlord decks in either the G or premium format. For his skills are, the first skill is, when called, by revealing 1 Grade 3 in your hand, you can search your deck for any Dragonic Overlord and add it to your hand. And after the Grade 3 Overlord was added to your hand by this skill, you later have to pay a cost of discarding 1 card in your hand. So ideally, this card's first skill is used to either search for a specific Dragonic Overlord you wish to ride to when it's time to go to Grade 3, or to have a second Grade 3 in hand for when it's time to pay for a stride cost. And then Lizard General Conroe's second skill, if your Vanguard is a Dragonic Overlord, by retreating Conroe from your rear guard, you can give your Vanguard a skill. The skill is, when your Vanguard attacks, you can countercharge 2. So he's also a good way to countercharge and to preserve your counterblast for skills. The Grade 1 Lava Flow Dragon. Pretty much a basic must-have for all Kagero V format decks, but also a good card to have in the premium format. His skill is, when ridden or called, you can check the top 5 cards of your deck for a Grade 3 and add it to your hand. If a card was added to your hand by this skill, you have to discard 1, so it's pretty much a good way to add more Grade 3s to your hand if you can get them. And then there's the second skill. As a Vanguard and a rear guard, if you have more rear guards than your opponent during your turn, Lava Flow continuously gets plus 5,000 power, effectively making him either a 13,000 power attacker or a 13,000 power booster. The Grade 1 Dragon Knight Nasser. His skill is, when called, if your Vanguard is Grade 3 or higher, you can Soul Blast 1, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and Superior Call a Grade 3. Ideally, this skill is used to Superior Call Grade 3s to your rear guard if your deck prioritizes having Grade 3s in your front row for attacking, which this deck focuses on. The Grade 1 Purple Gem Carbuncle. His skill is, when your Vanguard restands, he gets plus 15,000 power for the turn, thus making Purple Gem a 20,000 power attacker or 20,000 power booster, making him not a necessary, but a pretty good card to have for Overlord decks, since Overlords specialize in restanding after attacking. Alright then, that just about covers it for the Grade 1 lineup. Next, let's go to the Grade 2 lineup. For the Grade 2 lineup of this deck, we have 3 Burnrise Dragons, 4 Turret Cannon Dragons, and 4 Dragonic Neoflames. The Grade 2 Burnrise Dragon. His skill is when your Vanguard restands by counterblasting 1 and discarding 1 card from your hand, Burnrise gets plus 15,000 power and 1 critical till the end of the turn. Though not a must-have or necessary card for the Overlord series, it's a pretty helpful card to have if you want to have a front line with high power and critical, since the best part about Burnrise is his skill is stackable as long as you can restand your Vanguard multiple times, like for example Dragonic Overlord the End. So overall it's a pretty good Grade 2 to have in V and premium format Overlord decks. The Grade 2 Turret Cannon Dragon. His skill is as a Vanguard or a Rearguard by counterblasting 1 and sending 1 normal unit from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck, you can retire one of your opponent's Grade 2 or higher Rearguards, and after this skill is used, if you have 4 or less cards in hand, you can draw 1. So it's a pretty good way to retire opponent's Rearguards, and also if you have a small hand size, you can restock your hand by drawing 1. So pretty good Grade 2 there as well. And now the Grade 2 Dragonic Neoflame. His skill is whenever Dragonic Overlord the Great attacks, you can give it plus 5,000 power till the end of the battle and counterblast 2 and give it plus 1 critical until the end of that battle. So if you have multiple Neoflames in the field, you can give an attacking the Great, either a Vanguard or Rearguard, an extra power and possibly plus critical. So like I mentioned before, this deck focuses on having a bunch of Grade 3s in your front row, so Neoflame's a good way to give your attacking the Great some extra power and possible critical if you can't get any Grade 1s to boost it with in the back row. And with that just about covers it for the Grade 2 lineup of this deck. Next, let's go to the Grade 3 lineup. For the Grade 3 lineup of this deck, we have 4 Dragonic Overlord the Destiny, 3 Dragonic Overlord the Greats, 2 Dragonic Overlord the Classic. The Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord the Destiny, the main Grade 3 to ride in this deck as your Vanguard. His skills are: at the beginning of your turn, by Soul Blasting 1, you can choose 1 Rearguard circle on either player's field, and all cards on that circle are sent to the drop zone. So this first skill allows you to retire cards with your resist ability, or maybe remove locked cards from the field. So a good way to fight against Link Joker or any clans that have resist Rearguards. And then the second skill of Dragonic Overlord the Destiny is when straighten on top of, by counterblasting 1, you can retire 1 opponent's Rearguard and then check the top 7 cards of your deck or for an Overlord and add it to your hand. So the Stride skill is a good way to clear out your opponent's field and to possibly add more Overlords to your hand for the main strategy of this deck, which I'm going to explain later. The Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord the Great. His skill is, the first skill, when ridden as a Vanguard, you can superior call 1 Dragonic Neoflame from your drop zone to the Rearguard. And then the second skill, once per turn after attacking, you can counterblast 1, discard 2 cards from your hand, and stand your Vanguard and 1 Rearguard Dragonic Neoflame. And the Vanguard gets -1 drive, so as a Vanguard, it's a pretty common Overlord skill, it's still okay, since it can stand not just your Vanguard, but a rear guard as well. And then, the Grade 3, Dragonic Overlord the Classic. His skill is, as a Vanguard and a rear guard, once per turn, you can Soul Blast one and give the Dragonic Overlord paying this cost plus 10,000 power till the end of the turn. So, as either a Vanguard or a rear guard, this V format reboot of the original Dragonic Overlord is a pretty good card. And his second skill, as a Vanguard, once per turn, after attacking, you can pay the cost of 1 counterblast and discarding 2 cards from your hand. You can restand your Vanguard Overlord the Classic, and it gets minus drive plus -1 till the end of the turn. So, like the Great, it's pretty good standard Overlord to have for V formats, but for the main strategy of this deck that I'm going to explain later, it's a pretty good card to have as well, as both a Vanguard and a rear guard. And with that, we've just about covered the Grade 3 line of this deck. Next, the Trigger lineup. For the Trigger line of this deck, we have 1. Over Trigger, Dragon Deity, King of Resurgence, Dragvita. 4. Critical Triggers, Dragon Dancer, Paloma. 3. Critical Triggers, Dragon Dancer, Tikla. 4. Draw Triggers, Wyvern Guard, Bari. And 4. Heal Triggers, Dragon Dancer, Nastasha. The Over Trigger, Dragon Deity, King of Resurgence, Dragvita. Like all Over Triggers, it gives you the bonus of 100 million power when revealed in drive checks or damage checks, and as well as drawing 1 card. But the true strength of this Over Trigger is what I believe is best for all Overlord decks is you can restand your Vanguard after revealing this guy. So along with the plus power and the restanding, it's a good card to have for every Kagero deck, but in my opinion, it's best for Overlord decks since the builds for Overlord decks all specialize usually in restanding your Vanguard after attacking. The Critical Trigger, Dragon Dancer, Paloma. Her skill is, when discarded from your hand for a stride cost, she gets +3 grade, so she's effectively a stride fodder. By having her in your deck instead of a usual grade 1 stride fodder like Lava Flow Dragon or Doombringer High Flame, it's a good way to save up normal units for more offense-minded strategies and to save the stride fodders with this critical trigger unit. Critical Trigger, Dragon Dancer Tika. Her skill is Generation Break 1. When your Vanguard attacks, by moving her from your rear guard to the soul, the attacking Vanguard gets plus 10,000 power till the end of the battle, and you get to draw 1 card. So effectively, she's a good way to stock up your soul, draw a card, and to give power to your Vanguard for 1 battle. So she's a good way to defend and as well as to add offense. The Draw Trigger, Wyvern Guard Bari, Perfect Guard. Pretty much a Draw Trigger Sentinel. When placed in a Guardian Circle, by discarding 1 card from your hand, you can completely block 1 opponent's attack. Like I mentioned with Tikla, this guy in your trigger, among your trigger units, will help you save up cards in your normal unit grade 1 lineup, which you can focus more on offense strategy, since in the G and D formats they stick to grade 1 normal unit sentinels, and well, though perfect guards are ideal for all decks and clans, but you have less space for other grade 1s that will help your strategies for attacking or any other combo you want to have in mind. So choosing these Draw Trigger Sentinels is a good defense and a good way to save up space in your deck for more offensive or combo-minded great ones. And then the heal trigger, Dragon Dancer, Nastasha, Heal Guardian. In the V format nowadays, she's a must-have card for all Kagero decks, but she's also a good card for premium formats as well. For you see, her skills are, when placed on the Guardian Circle, if you have not ridden to Great Tree yet during that card fight, you can choose one of the two skills. You can choose one of your units in your field, like your Vanguard, and it gets plus 10,000 power till the end of the turn. Or you can choose one of your opponent's attacking units, and for that battle, it gets -2 critical. So this first guarding skill is a good way to stop your opponents from rushing you early with a whole bunch of attacks before you get a chance to bring out your main cards and main strategies. And then the second skill of Nastasha is, when called into the rearguard circle, if you have no cards in your damage zone, you can place the top card of your deck onto the damage zone face up. So this second skill is a good way to stop opponents who like to play the annoying damage denial strategy, which is they refuse to attack your Vanguard until the appropriate time to prevent you from using your counter blast. So overall, this heal trigger, Heal Guardian, is a good card to have in V format and premium format, both defensive wise and for overall strategy wise, since she gives you a decent defense and protects you from damage denial. And with that, we've just about covered the trigger line of this deck. Next, we go to the G zone. For the G zone of this deck, first let's start out with the G units. For the G units, we have 4 Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Zanbust Dragon. 2 Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Dragonic Overlord, the Purge. 2 Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Dragonic Overlord, the Ace. 2 Flare General, Dumjit Valor. And 2 Flare Arms, Ziegenberg. The Grade 4 G Unit, Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Zanbust Dragon, the main G Unit of this deck. Like I mentioned before in the previous parts, the main strategy of this deck is to attack from your front row with multiple Grade 3 Overlords, and this card is why. For you see, his skill is, by flipping one card in your G zone face up, you can retire all of your opponent's rear guards, and during that turn, all Grade 3 and higher cards in your front row get plus 10,000 power till the end of the turn. So this skill will combo well with Dragonic Overlord the Great and Dragonic Neoflame's skills, which add power and critical to the attacking Dragonic Overlord the Great, and for Dragonic Overlord the Classic, whose own skill will let him increase his own power by 10,000. So when comboed with this G unit, these two Overlords can deal more devastating attacks with their own respective skills and possible combos. The Grade 4 G Unit, Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Dragonic Overlord the Purge. Though not the main G Unit of this deck, it's still a pretty good card to have. His skill is, by turning one card in your G zone face up and moving one Overlord from your hand into the soul, if your opponent has 4 or less cards in his damage zone, you can deal 1 damage, and for that damage, the opponent cannot use any trigger effects. So it's a good card to have to stride early to increase your opponent's damage count without having to attack. And then there's also the second skill of the Purge, which is Generation Break 3. The Purge's drive check becomes the same number of cards as your opponent's damage zone. So ideally, this second skill works best if your opponent's already at 5 damage, or if you've used the first skill to push your opponent to 5 damage, you'll be able to do a quintet drive for this G Unit's attack. Though not the main G Unit of this deck, it's still a pretty good card to have as a way to increase your chances of getting a trigger or to increase your hand size for the next turn. Then next, the Grade 4 G unit, Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, Dragonic Overlord the Ace. His skill is, by counterblasting 2 and flipping 1 the Ace face up into your G zone, he gets a skill. Once per turn, after attacking, you can pay a cost of discarding 1 Overlord and 1 Kagero unit from your hand to the drop zone. You can restand the Ace after he attacks, and after restanding, it gets plus 5,000 power. But the downside of this skill is, after paying the original Counterblast 2 and flipping the Ace face up in your G zone, he also gets -1 drive. So mainly this G unit is used to give your Vanguard at least 2 the Ace attacks with 26,000 power or more and 2 drive checks. The Grade 4 G unit, Flare General, Dumjit Valor. His first skill is Blaze. When a unit on your field attacks, if you have more rear guards, your Vanguard enters the blazing state. The second skill, by counterblasting 1 and turning 1 card in your G zone face up, then your Vanguard, Dumjit Valor, gets plus 15,000 power for every Sentinel in your drop zone. So if you have a bunch of perfect guards, quintet walls, or any other kind of sentinel in your drop zone, you'll be able to stack this effect with just one payment of the cost. And then there's the second skill of Dumjit Valor. After attacking, if your Vanguard is already in the blazing state, and if your opponent has guarded this turn with either a G Guardian or Sentinel, you can restand your Vanguard and it gets -1 drive. So ideally, if you've already confirmed if your opponent has a heal trigger to pay for G Guardian or a Sentinel ready to block your attacks, this card will let you restand your Vanguard for almost no cost, which goes well with the second skill, which stacks power to your Vanguard. So mainly this card's a good way to finish off your opponent. If you've already confirmed if they have a proper defense in their hand, you can take advantage of. And now, the Grade 4 G unit, Flare Arms Ziegenberg. First skill, Blaze. Like I mentioned before, when a unit in your field attacks, if you have more rear guards, your Vanguard enters the blazing state. Then the second skill of Ziegenberg. Once per turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and turn 1 Ziegenberg in your G zone face up. You can retire 1 opponent's rear guard. A basic skill for Kagero decks, but it'll go well with the third skill of this G unit, which I'm going to explain now. Once per turn, Generation Break 3. After attacking, you can Counterblast 1 and discard the same number of cards as your opponent has in their rear guard circles to restand your Vanguard, but you have to -2 drives. Ultimately, this card is a good way to, like, a good restanding Vanguard, because you see his third skill's activation requires you not only pay 1 counterblast, but discard the same number of cards as your opponent's rear guards. Like I mentioned before, if the second skill goes well with this card's third skill, is if you've managed to reduce your opponent's rear guards to 0 before you attack with this G unit, you can almost, well, basically restand your Vanguard without discarding any cards from your hand, as long as you've reduced their rear guards to 0, like for example using this G unit's second skill, or perhaps Dragonic Overlord the Destiny skills, his first skill and second skill, which lets you wipe out your opponent's rear guards. So it's pretty much a good G unit to have if you want to focus on restanding, and also do a little side benefit of retiring opponent's rear guards. And with that we've covered the G units of this deck. Next, let's go to the G Guardians of this deck. For the G Guardians of this deck, we have 1. Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, defeat Flare Dragon. 2. Flamewing Steel Beast, Denial Griffin. 1. Divine Dragon Knight, Absalam. The Grade 4, G Guardian, Supreme Heavenly Emperor Dragon, defeat Flare Dragon. His skill is, when used to guard against your opponent's Vanguard, attack against your own Vanguard by counterblasting 1 and sending 2 Grade 3s from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck. You can retire all rear guards in your opponent's back row. Ideally, this card is best when your opponent attacks with your Vanguard first. This way you can wipe out their entire back row, thus reducing their boosting power from their Vanguard and their remaining 2 columns, since this skill will not only clear out your opponent's field, but also weaken their remaining attacks from their left and right column, and also reducing the power received from the boosting unit from your opponent's Vanguard attack. The Grade 4, G Guardian, Flamewing Steel Beast, Denial Griffin. His skill is, when your opponent's rear guard attacks your Vanguard by counterblasting 1, this guy can retire the attacking rear guard. So ideally he can be used as almost like a perfect guard for rear guard attacks, since very few cards can defend against this skill. So playing 2 is my option, but most people like to play 4 or more, or at least, up to 4. So because this skill is absolute. So in my opinion, he's a must-have for all Kagero decks, since it's an almost absolute defense. And then the Grade 4, G Guardian, Divine Dragonite Absalam. His skill is, when used to guard against a opponent's Vanguard attacking against your Vanguard by counterblasting 1, he gets plus 10,000 shield for every empty rearguard circle in your opponent's field. So ideally, he can at most get 50,000 shield if your opponent has no rearguards on their field. So on his own, he's a pretty good guardian for high power attacks. And with that, we've just about covered the G Guardians of this deck. Next, we go to the Imaginary Gifts. For the Imaginary Gifts of this deck, we have 4 Imaginary Gift Force 1 or 2s. For the Imaginary Gifts, I play the 2-sided Force markers, which lets you use Force 1, which any card on the circle with this marker is placed on gets plus 10,000 power during your turn. And Force 2, any circle on your field with this card, the unit on that circle will get 2 critical instead of 1. So pretty much a must-have for V format, but it's only an option for premium format, since the main Grade 3 I'm riding in this deck is Dragonic Overlord the Destiny. But a secondary Vanguard I like to ride could also be Dragonic Overlord the Classic, if I want to get the Imaginary Gift on either my Vanguard or rearguard circles to give myself a better edge for my upcoming attacks with Zanbust Dragon. And with that, we've just about covered all the cards in this deck. First off, I want to thank all the viewers for watching today's video, and to stay tuned for any more videos I plan to upload in the near future. And perhaps you can also show your support by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to my videos and channel. And with that, I say goodbye and see you all soon.